Then we saw these really savage kind of like knife attacks that were starting to take place, and then we saw people that had connections to the Joker and that character that were directly involved with a lot of these just like brutal acts of violence, which, just stunning when you started looking at how closely connected the Joker character was to these people and to these events. Even beyond just the Joker in and of itself, yesterday, Valentine's Day, was the 1-year anniversary of the killings at Northern Illinois University.
Yeah.
And that particular situation wasn't a Joker situation specifically, but that particular individual was fascinated with the character from the Saw movies.
Yes.
And was even had a tattoo. I guess the character's name is Jigsaw. Mm-hmm. And so we saw a similar situation with the victim of the Canadian Greyhound bus decapitation that took place. The victim in that particular instance had kind of Joker tattoos and was actually referred to as the Joker by his friends, and just all these things on and on. Then, we just had this situation in Belgium with the nursery killings. Yeah. And the individual in that instance supposedly showed up, painted up to look like the Joker. And went so far as to indirectly kind of reference a line from the Dark Knight movie, but in the press releases, the press stories that were coming out immediately as it was happening, that the press even went to great length to make the connection themselves to the Joker and to the Dark Knight movies. So, we weren't really seeing those connections made by the mainstream media with some of these earlier events that were that researchers like myself find to be connected to Heath Ledger and to the Dark Knight. But what we saw there was that in some ways, like now the mass media were starting to make similar, almost synchronistic connections in mainstream media coverage, which I found pretty interesting.
Well, isn't that interesting? It's almost as if the work of pointing these things out actually kind of infuse the whole society with the same basic idea, and really, if you think about it, in many cases, as you said before, the connections there are so obvious, so it's almost like, duh, how can you avoid not to go there in a way, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. But to see it actually taking place that way is something altogether different, really, because I don't expect to see reporting like that. But I'm certainly not suggesting that researchers like myself or anyone else are influencing mainstream reporting. But it will be interesting to see if mainstream reporting starts to take on more of the qualities of some of the ways that we're approaching writing about these subjects.
Well, I mean, if they are, let's take that into account. If they are observing the what has been referred to as the blog sphere, I guess, if there's a lot of people writing about it, and you're a journalist and you go online to check what you can find, or you do specific searches, let's say on just blogs or WordPress or what have you, then they might absolutely pick up on that and find, connections and write about it themselves. We're not sure the way that many of the journalists, how they approach a subject, or if they are even allowed to go off on a tangent like that. But I definitely think that on a more subtle level, the influence takes place anyway. But that's another story. We don't have to go there now. But
right.
You never know.
Well, I guess in some ways to enlighten the listeners if they're not even familiar, like one of the things that the media had picked up on with the case in Belgium was the fact that the kid who perpetrated this crime, his last name is De Gelder, and they picked up on the fact that his last name, Gelder, is an anagram for ledger, which reconnects him, not only the fact that he was supposedly had painted himself up to look like the Joker, his name is an anagram for Heath Ledger, which, ties it all completely back. And when you look at these cases, and there have been a number of them. If you look at some of my work and some of Lauren Coleman's work, these aren't the only ones. There are even some smaller ones, but they all have these kind of signature things like that connect them in some form or fashion. They are connected through these little signatures, if you will.
That's really interesting. It reminds me, as you say, I mean, you referenced Lawrence Coleman again, and could it be that this is the copycat effect that he's been writing about, that we're witnessing in that sense, that when the media begins to highlight these types of events, it kind of spreads in a kind of viral way, again, to use that word, and kids, for whatever reason, are in some way or fashion reacting to this, or they're playing out this event over and over again. What do you think?
There's definitely something to that. Lauren has, literally written a book on that.
Yes.
And I don't think that there's any denying that. I don't. Obviously, the mainstream media doesn't really necessarily want to identify themselves with helping that along, or I don't want to say encouraging, but that.
Yeah, they don't want to recognize that they have a responsibility in a way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so, that's really kind of the crux of what he's doing is, trying to get the media to realize that. Of course, that's probably never likely going to happen. They're certainly not going to take responsibility for any of it. And at some level, nor should they. I mean, we as human beings have to be responsible for our own actions. But, in a number of these cases, and this particular case in question as well, on the conspiratorial end of things, we have to look at things like mind control and think about it in terms of that as well, because, this particular kid has no recollection of the event itself. He remembers everything prior to that and immediately after that, but has no memory of the of what he actually did.
Isn't that interesting?
And not all cases are like that, and so when you start thinking about it in terms of mind control and that, it requires a trigger to set the person off to do whatever it is. You do have to look at things like the media and these movies. Are these movies acting as triggers?
Yeah.
That's something that I haven't really written about specifically, but I do kind of allude to a lot of times that, is that what's happening? Is something like The Dark Knight, which, a lot of people have a really bad feeling either when they're watching that movie or after they finish watching that movie. And is that bad feeling something deeper embedded in the movie that they may be picking up on, i.e. like some sort of, subconscious trigger that's embedded in the film itself. I mean, that's pure speculation on my part, certainly, and that's on the real far end probably of conspiracy research, but it is something I find interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it needs to be considered in whatever shape or form it actually is playing out. I mean, again, we could be talking about a hands-on, interference, as it were, in the film process, or even part of the entire film process itself to do these types of things, either as a freaking experiment or what have you, or it could just be the other level to all this is that in some kind of weird way, this is the people who are involved in the film work are in some way subconsciously releasing this into the movie, and this is something that is, the people out there that are watching this, that are being so-called entertained by this, are reacting to it in a horrible way, and this is an unfortunate outcome of that. There's just so much more to say about that, of course, why that would be, and the psychology behind many of the kids that are doing it. But again, it's very interesting that many of these kids that are involved, they have either there are or have been on some kind of antidepressants in many cases. There's a psychological or a past with psychological disturbances, as it were, or they've been involved here and there with different there've been problem kids, so to speak, at school, and we don't know at this point if they are being used to spread violence and fear throughout society. And again, I mean, Virginia Tech, we have Columbine, there's numerous examples to be mentioned. We had in Finland a while back. It's like no, it seems to be across the board, and that's why it's interesting to pay attention to it. And why is this happening? And no one seems to again look at the deeper aspects to it, or the possible occult aspects to all of this stuff.
Oh yeah, and the occult footprint, if you will, is on a lot of these things. I think Ben Fairhall is a writer that I think does a really good job dealing with the kind of occult side of a lot of these kind of cases.
Yeah.
That we see happening. Yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say about it. I can go on and on about how fascinating it is, but
yes. Well, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
The ramifications, unfortunately, of these kind of events are much broader. Laws get passed that take away a lot of our civil liberties because of these cases, and in some ways rightfully so, because people get scared and they want to, but unfortunately a lot of people want